1956, two 1958 graduates, Tim and Sharon Ubben, decided they wanted to bring the world to Greencastle, literally. And they created this endowment that allows us to bring in guests like the one we have tonight. We've had people like Mikhail Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, we had Malala earlier this semester. Jimmy Kimmel was here 3 years ago tonight. We were just commenting on the fact that this is the anniversary of that speech. And this will be number 109 in the 31 years. We've had 109 speakers here at DePauw University as Ubben lecturers. When I took over the series in 2002, one of the things that bothered me a little bit was we had one DePauw alumnus speak in this series in the many years since the program had started. Farid Murad, the class of 1958, who won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, which is a great event. But I saw an opportunity to also, in addition to bringing in people like Tony Blair, underscore the great things that people from DePauw do in the world, who are change makers and literally are world leaders. And so we've had 6 alumni since that point in 2002, most recently Vernon Jordan from the class of 1957. Bill Rasmussen tonight becomes the 6th, I'd make that 7th DePauw alumnus to present an Ubben lecture. And one thing people don't know and that we really don't talk about, we've never once had an alumnus charge us for an Ubben lecture. And in Bill's case, that's especially amazing because he got here Monday night, he's staying through the game, and will be leaving Sunday. We have his days packed with student meetings. He's been meeting with media fellows, management fellows, rector scholars. We're both rector scholars. And so he deserves a really big round of applause for what he's giving to DePauw, his time, his talent, and his love for this place. Tonight is a celebration and examination of that man and his idea. It's also a celebration of this place and the people it has produced and continues to. So, without further ado, I'm going to yield the floor to somebody we all know, and it's not Bill Rasmussen, but he'll be out in a second. Please watch the screen.
Hi, I'm Chris Berman. If you're under, say, 35 years of age, you're saying, what do you mean we don't get 300 stations? Well, in the 70s, ancient history, what was cable TV? One man, visionary, 24 hours of sports on TV. He was told it'll never work. Just like a few years before that, man will never walk on the moon. Wrong and wrong. Bill Rasmussen was right. ESPN is an idea that'll work. Boy, has it ever. 30 plus years later, we're everywhere. But how did we really begin? Only Bill Rasmussen can take you back to the beginning of the greatest success story in the history of sports television. His ideas, yes, his enthusiasm, his fierce determination and belief in success changed the way we all watch television and the way we watch sports today. And I ought to know he did it with a smile, every bit of it. Ladies and gentlemen, our George Washington, Bill Rasmussen.
If you're a fan, what you'll see in the next minutes, hours, and days to follow may convince you you've gone to sports heaven. Beyond that blue horizon is a limitless world of sports, and right now, you're standing on the edge of tomorrow. Sports, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from ESPN, the Total Sports Cable Network. Show of hands, how many saw that the first time? I thought so. The audiences are getting older, or no, I'm getting older, I guess it is. Anyway, can you imagine Bristol, Connecticut, tiny little area that we bought 1 acre and 1/3 of land. It was a garbage dump. I'm sorry, redevelopment area is what they call it officially, but that means the dump was full. And the building was, we're going to talk about this and show you a couple of views of what was going on. But no one had ever gone around the clock 24 hours a day. And we were going on the air the first time telling the world we were going to do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's what really happened. And I want to show you, just very quickly before Ken and I get back to what we're talking now, You see, this could be considered technology in a bygone era, I suppose. Sometimes I can't make it work, but it does seem to work. You see the logo up there? ESPN. That circle around there, some people spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to develop a logo.
Millions sometimes.
Millions. And we had the 4 letters ESPN. We thought we were pretty good. Put in an envelope, ESPN, Bristol, Connecticut. Our printer looked at that. We asked him to get some things done. He said, you know what? That is the dumbest looking logo I have ever seen. We have to do something. So he drew that circle around it. And since Getty Oil had financed it, he put it in the Getty Oil colors. And I don't know if we have this on. See, I told you technology.
Well, you were playing with it earlier, so.
Don't look.
I think it's this thing. Let's see, Bill.
No, I don't think it's on. Well,
Well,
okay.
maybe you can do that pitch you did for ESPN, once again. No, let's start talking, and we can throw in slides later. Is my mic working? It's really hard to tell with these Elroy Jetson things on because everything's kind of bouncing around. I want to start our conversation with your arriving at DePauw University in 1950. And Bill was born right around the time the first Monon Bell game was played. So this has always been a dream of mine to bring you back Monon Bell Week and talk about your experience at DePauw, the things you've done, give our students some life advice, and talk about what makes this place special. We're going to start with DePauw in 1950. Tell me what this place was like.
Well, first of all, you referred me and the Monon Bell and so on. Literally, paraphrasing another American who was making a speech someplace back east, 86 years ago, the Monon Bell arrived to be awarded to the champion. Can you imagine that? 86 years worth of Monon Bell games. And this year, the Bell is staying here. Am I right?
Yes.
Am I right? We better have it stay here.
And we thank you all for being here as guards tonight. Much appreciated.
I'm going to make this thing work sometime
Well,
before.
I'm going to play with it while you talk, but tell me, so we're coming out of World War II.
Now, this is from a company that has more engineering power than you can imagine. Oh, there we go. Look at
With your finger here.
He is an electronic wizard, isn't he?
I'm 2 years younger than you are, so
Okay.
I figured it out.
I mentioned that redevelopment area. That's it. That's the sign we put up, and we told the world we're going to do this. And how do you like? Now, some of you are in graphic arts, and some of you are looking to do some wonderful things in the world. How do you like that classy-looking logo? E period S period D period, etc.
Not too sharp.
Not a good thing. This picture was 28 days, 4 weeks to the day before we went on the air. And if you look in the background, you can see the building isn't even up. How they did it, I will never know. But one of the things that we set out to do, and we told the cable industry we were going to do 24 hours of sports, and we told them we were going to start September 7th, 1979 at 7 o'clock. And there were all kinds of reasons why we shouldn't have started. This one was pretty discouraging to the people who were spending the money to build it. But we said because of history in the cable industry of announcements and failure and announcement and failure, we were going to start. And which button are you pushing? This one right here.
Right at the end here.
Look at that.
What? You went too far.
Have any of you ever seen a test pattern on the broadcast channel? When we were growing up, and even when Ken was growing up, at least for a few years of his life, at midnight Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, the test pattern would come up. The announcers on all the local stations would say, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our local broadcast day, so and so, and here's the national anthem. And the entire network went dark for 6 hours till 7 in the morning, around the clock for 18 hours. And they told us we couldn't do 24. Nobody can fill the time for that. Well, I think that was wrong. I thought it was wrong then. I think they were crazy. The people who didn't agree with us, I thought they were crazy. And ESPN has never, 38 years plus now, never shown a test pattern. 24 hours started September 7th, 1979, and away we went.
So let's go back to DePauw in 1950.
Well, that's what this looked like
Oh,
in
yeah.
1950.
I looked it up today, Bill. There were 3 million American households had television. So there couldn't have been many TVs on campus back then. And a TV set back then cost $500 in 1950 dollars, which today, if you factor in inflation, is $5,251.
Yep.
Buy a pretty nice setup for that today.
Well, here at DePauw, when I got here, each fraternity house, housing was a little bit different then, but each fraternity house had one TV and one house mother. And if she said, you're going to turn the TV off at 7 o'clock because I don't want noise bothering the freshmen, the TV got turned off. And you can imagine when a basketball game was on the air or a football game, which was very, very rare. Really, sports on television didn't begin until the late 1940s. The time before that, in World War II, no television, nobody made TV sets. Every single asset was devoted to winning the war. There were no automobiles produced, no TV sets produced. And one of the intriguing things to me, he's going to do one more right there. There was a book, and if you're really interested in history, and this will tell you a little bit about what's going on today in America, just as it did then. This book is December 1941. It has 30 chapters, December 1, 2, 3, 4 to 31. And after December 7th, the first thing, I want your honest reaction on this. Now, see if this sounds familiar. The first thing that happened was congressmen called for an investigation. Whose fault was it? One side said the president deceived us and got us in the war. The other side said it was a dastardly attack and he had nothing to do with it. And that permeated the whole culture at the time. Everybody argued back and forth. What are we going to do? Well, first of all, we're going to ration gasoline. We're going to ration meat and food and tires. That's just the way it was. But the most important thing to me from a television point of view was that censorship in America was imposed. Television could not, the few television sets that there were, could not show any battle footage, any war footage. It just was not allowed, which is kind of scary now that I look back on it, but that's the way it was. The War Department, not the Defense Department, not Homeland Security, and they did call it the War Department, that's what it was, produced a 15-minute film each week, and you go to your local theater, and on Saturday afternoon you'd see what's happening in the war, quote unquote. It was a polished, finished movie. I don't know how authentic any of them were, but they did it that way. And it was in this, growing up in this atmosphere of, we just minded our own business. We were the so-called silent generation. We're going to do all of this. We're all going to pull together. America pulled together. We won the war. And come 1947, NBC put together the NBC television network. And I would win $1 from all of you if I asked you to guess how many stations were in the NBC network back in that day. The total was 4. Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C., and Schenectady, New York. That's the whole neighborhood. So there was no television network here in Indianapolis for us to watch at the fraternity house when we arrived. There was no ABC around at that time. And from a sports television point of view, Walter Byers, who was a brand new, newly minted, I guess you would say, commissioner, executive director of the NCAA, struck a deal with NBC in 1951 for an 11-game football schedule for $1 million. $1 million bought 11 football games, and they watched, the usual suspects, Notre Dame and Southern Cal, Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, and so on. That was the only television contract of any consequence until well into the 70s. The NFL had some contracts with the old AFL and NFL. But when we were here at DePauw, all we had was black and white television from Indianapolis, and I don't even remember if they were affiliated with anybody. It might have just been an independent station. And another thing that we have all these restrictions today about who has the rights to a certain territory for TV. There were no such things when TV was exploding. In New York, they had 3 teams. They would often play all be playing at the same time. 2 of them in New York and 1 of them in Philadelphia, maybe. So that was the atmosphere, television-wise, and really all of that led. I wanted to play baseball for the White Sox, but that went away. We couldn't do that. The Korean War got in the way. I came to DePauw on a Rector's scholarship in 1950. We graduated from high school on June 25th, 1950, and for those of you who are historians, that's the day North Korea invaded South Korea. The next day, we were all told, if you have a college deferment, you better go to college, or otherwise you're going to Korea. There is a great, great incentive to do the former, not the latter, I'm going to tell you. As a matter of fact, just as an aside, our first baseman did go to Korea, He was drafted instantly within 10 days of graduation. He was wounded and back in Chicago before Labor Day. It was not a pleasant time, and so that got me interested in television. I saw, and I can show you this one. There is the first television set that I ever saw. Isn't that a slick-looking thing?
That's 4K, isn't it?
4K?
Yeah.
I don't know,
Maybe
4Q maybe. But anyway, that's how I was introduced to television, and we used to watch ABC Wide World of Sports and all of those things. But this is what we had. That looks pretty close to the set we had at the Lambda Chi House when I was here.
I want to do 2 quick orders of business.
Sure.
Number one, I want to thank you for your service with Veterans Day coming up. Thank you, Bill. It's important to say that, and our audience would like to thank you too. Thank you. And to our other veterans in the House. It's an important thing to
Thank
say.
you.
And I meant to kind of ride you about this a little bit, but Malala, was our last Oven lecturer. She was the youngest in the history of the series. Guess what?
Where are you going with this one?
I'm going to my next question. Okay, so we have established that in 1950, your media choices were few.
And really, the opportunities when I got to DePauw, the nation was kind of shocked. The Korean War thing was just getting underway, and we didn't know if we would really be allowed to stay here, but the Air Force ROTC that was established here on the DePauw campus. And you talked about the Navy V-12 program was here during World War II. Things that we don't ordinarily hear about small Midwestern schools. During the war, the East Coast, everybody was afraid that the Germans were going to bomb the East Coast, and the West Coast, the Japanese were going to come. So a lot of industry building war materials was right here in the Midwest. And I just have to digress for a moment, because 2 things that really, even though I knew about them eventually, surprised me. They made submarines in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, dumped them into Lake Michigan, came down the Illinois River, down the Mississippi, and went off to war in the Gulf of Mexico. And the other one was the Glenview Naval Air Station had an aircraft carrier in Lake Michigan. Maybe all of you knew that, but it really surprised me when I found out about it. But the war effort really coalesced the nation, and GIs coming back with the GI Bill, they came to college, and they were going to rebuild America, and that's really what happened. And we had, I think, I don't know how many were on campus, but we had 2 World War II veterans in the Lambda Chi House, and when they told a freshman to do something, if he got any lip, that was not a good idea. It was not a good idea. They didn't put up with very much, but the nation was emerging. We all thought there was nothing that we couldn't accomplish. That was just the feeling. And if you got to go to college, I ended up being an econ major and a minor in history. And that's not very good for broadcasting, but it's good for the broadcasting business.
Liberal arts is good for broadcasting.
It
We can
is.
talk about that
It
a little
is.
bit.
I came out of the Air Force and worked for Westinghouse for a while, and they had a program that allowed me to get a master's at Rutgers, which was great. I started my own first business in 1959, and it became a success. It was an advertising service business. We shipped things out within 24 hours a day. Does that sound? Order in today, 24 hours later or less, it was on its way to its destination, which was superb. That led to a few other things, and I said, I'm still not going to give up on this broadcasting business. WGRE was here in one room. Not a lot of background there. But one thing that I learned at DePauw was you can learn as much as you want or as little as you want. You can take advantage of all of the assets that are here, or you can ignore some of them. I wanted to know everything about everything. And so when it came time for me, when I decided I was going to go into the radio business, there used to be a broadcasting magazine with little 2-line ads saying, newscaster wanted, call such and such, sportscaster wanted. And I said, well, I know about the news, but I think I want to be a sportscaster. So I called a guy who was in Rhode Island, and I knew I could get the job. I didn't know what the job was, but I knew I could get it. You got to have heart. You got to be confident. So he said, sure, come on up. I went up to see him. He said, you bring a tape? No. Well, what station do you work for? I said, I've never worked in radio before. He said, you drove all the way from New Jersey to Rhode Island. You're not in the radio business, and you're applying for a job with no experience. Why would I hire you? How do I know anything about you? I said, because I can do it, period. It will get done. And so he said, it's the most unusual job interview I've ever had. But I'll tell you what, he said, I'm building a new station in Massachusetts, and if you'll commit to go up there, you'll be my sportscaster, but here's one little caveat. You have to march through the snow and do all the testing to get the station on the air. And so I went up there Christmas of 1962, and April 1st, 1963, said my first words on radio. And then the University of Massachusetts is there, and I thought anyway, one thing that I had never done a play-by-play because I hadn't even spoken on the radio until April 1st. And I said, well, I'll go talk to the athletic director and see if we can do the UMass football games. Went up there, and his receptionist said, sure, he's in his office. I went in, I said, Mr. McGurk, I'm so-and-so from WTT Amherst. We'd like to do your football games. He said, you would? Sure, go ahead. Anything else? No contract, no fees, no rights fee or anything. So I thought while I was on a roll, not knowing anything about how really to do this, I'd say, well, how would you feel about me putting together a group of stations throughout Massachusetts? And maybe 6, 8, 10, it turned out to be 10 stations. And we'll broadcast your games across the state, and we'll even throw in a Maine station or a Vermont station or two. Oh, why not? Anything else you want to talk? Good luck. So that was my introduction into networking and broadcasting and play-by-play. And Bill Wagner's here someplace and would appreciate the story. I know that. On the way, that first game that I was going to do the play-by-play around the way to Orono, Maine, I had never done any play-by-play anywhere. And Dick Page was the sports information director assigned to make sure that I had all the information. And it's about an 8-hour drive up to Maine. He kept saying, are you okay? You ready for the game? And I'm saying, yeah. And I was hoping he would not say, how many of these have you done? Or where did you do your last game? So we went up and did the game. And I debated all the way up there. Should I tell him I've never done this, or should I just mind my own business? I decided my own business and went and did the game. And maybe we invented something new and that's never been done again, but the game was a good game. And football games carry the whole thing, and they carry old or young or whatever new announcers. But I think that kind of spirit, probably for many colleges, not only DePauw, coming out of that post-World War II era, our generation couldn't wait to get to college. In my family, I was the first person to have the opportunity to go to college. And I later had a brother who graduated 4 years later from here, and a son who graduated in 1986. I think I probably brainwashed them, but they both enjoyed and had a great career, a great academic experience here. And the one thing that every class that we went into, except those 8 o'clock classes, they were tough. Sometimes.
Always are.
Every class we went to, we could ask anything, and the basic answer was, well, what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? The professors that we had then would help. We had, in economics, we had a series of professors. And one of them was financial organization and investment. I can't imagine what I was going to do with that course, and I'm saying, why am I here? And this professor was well known for off the chalkboard, the blackboards. He'd start in one corner, go all the way around, write stuff, and if you weren't paying attention, he'd take one of those erasers and fire it right at you and hit you in the shoulder, and dust would break up, blow up into your face and everything. But he got our attention. I think the thing at DePauw that made us want to do things is we were challenged to be better. And that's what I would say to everyone here tonight. You can always do something else. There's nobody is going to tell you, don't try to improve yourself. It's just there. And as we go through some of these things, I talk about never stop asking questions. Yes. I think that takes us a long, long way. And even if you don't like the answer, it's okay. It'll be an improvement for you when you find out what went wrong.
Well, I'm going to ask one right now because this train has got to move pretty quickly to get to the question and answer
Go.
session, and we got a lot of ground to cover. So let's go ahead to 1978. And you and Scott are stuck in traffic.
Yes.
Scott would later graduate from DePauw in 1986, as you mentioned. But
absolutely.
How did this, put us in that car, how did this idea to have a 24-hour sports network come to you?
First, I had to get fired, so I had the opportunity to do this. If you don't get fired at least once in your life, you just haven't lived, you know. I was working with the Hartford Whalers as their communications director. They missed the playoffs. They fired everybody in the front office. We never skated in any of the losses or wins of the team, but anybody threw us out. And we had been working with the hockey club, with the cable operators in Connecticut. So we were kind of heading down a path to do things really in Connecticut. But then getting fired by the Whalers didn't endear them to me, so I didn't want to talk to the Whalers. But we held a bunch of conversations with some cable operators in Connecticut, and one of them gave us the best advice there was. And this led me to adapt early on to don't ever be afraid to ask a question. He said, I've got the number for the RCA SATCOM division sales office in New York City. Here it is. Just call them. I'm thinking, little guy from the south side of Chicago, I've just been fired. I've been, what am I going to do? But then I also thought I had 3 kids in school, so that kind of helped out. And I picked up the phone and called, and the operator, as I was dialing, I realized the operator's going to put me through to whoever. She doesn't know who I am. She's not going to decide who gets to talk to anybody. She said, I told her who I was, what I wanted. She said, oh, yes, sir, one moment, please. The guy came on the line. He said, my name's Al Parinello. Can I help you? I said, yeah, we want to find out a little bit more of the satellite charges, how it works, and so on, because I had no background in communications. He said, where are you in Connecticut? I thought this was kind of unusual. He said, where are you in Connecticut? I said, just outside Hartford. He said, I'll be up tomorrow morning. What we didn't know, but by my asking the question, it triggered a chain of events that eventually gave us the satellite to do the 24-hour a day. RCA had launched the satellite in 1975. The military occupied half of it. The other half was flying around absolutely empty. They would sell people 2 hours, 5 hours, and HBO would buy 5 hours at night and so on. When he came up, he said, we have one tariff item that nobody has ever purchased. Well, tell me, give me the idea. This is kind of like, what's behind door number 3? And he said, and Scott was in the room. Scott was really sharp with numbers. And he said, it's a 5-year contract, 24 hours a day, $34,167 a month. Scott says that can't be true. Because the other tariff, you added the others, $1,250 here and $1,250 there, it was like $100,000. What we didn't know is RCA was making every effort to get somebody started on a 24-hour plan. We said, we talked about it, we called him back the next morning, and my scientific knowledge comes into play. I said, Al, we'll take one of those things. Because he had told us he told us it was a transponder, but I didn't know that. I said, we'll take one of those. He said, one of what things? One of those 24-hour things we talked about yesterday. He said, you will? He was really surprised that we would take it. So that was really the genesis of what turned out to be Espn. We now had the satellite. We were driving down to my daughter's birthday on August 16th in the car that you were referring to. And we were saying, how do you fill 24 hours a day? We didn't have any money, we didn't have any equipment, we didn't have any studio, and at that point we didn't even have any land. But those were minor details. They'd come in due time. And they came in due time. And I've often thought about that when we talked to that one phone call to RCA, because you never, ever know what the other guy's business is and how it might work with yours and back and forth. And so I've always never stopped asking questions. Yeah. And we were on the road to New Jersey. And I was driving, Scott's in the right seat. We got stuck in a traffic jam outside Waterbury, Connecticut, and he decided to take a nap, and he's laying there, and what are we going to play? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So he leaned over and kind of and he just leaned and said, I don't play football all day for I care. Guess what? The NCAA has more football games than you can put on. They have more basketball games, and it just kept growing, and in fact, that led us to the idea to pick up the phone and call John Toner at the University of Connecticut, who was the incoming, I didn't know this at the time either, incoming president of the NCAA. He was also very, very enthused about what we might do for the University of Connecticut in the state of Connecticut. And he said, talk to the TV guy, and Bo Coppage at Navy is the current chairman of the TV committee. 2 weeks later, after that phone call, Navy was coming to the University of Connecticut to play a game, and he said, Bo, like we're all buddies, Bo will be here, he'll meet you at the hotel. And the pieces just fell into place, all because we just kept saying, what about, can we do this, can we do that? And you have to have that, some people say no, but when they tell me no, I think they made a mistake. I don't think it was a bad question.
Well, we're going to have time for questions about ESPN itself. Let's just bullet through the first day at ESPN. Give us a 65-second account of...
First day at ESPN,
yeah, it had to
what?
be crazy.
It was frantic. The building wasn't finished. We had a guy at 6. We went on the air at 7 o'clock. 6:30, there was a member of the construction crew going down at his regular pace and cleaning the windows, and we'd say, "Excuse me," and he'd step out of the way, and he'd go back to cleaning his windows. Okay. And all of the dignitaries from the NCAA, from Budweiser, our major advertising buy, bigger than any other in history at that point, they were all in this control room, and we had a technical director sitting there pushing buttons, and the monitors are up there and so on. But they were all in the control room so they could see what's happening in the studio. The control room wasn't built yet. They were fake monitors and a fake switcher and everything else. The broadcast was being done from a remote trailer outside the back of the building. We couldn't very well do that. And the highlight that I remember of that, and you athletes will appreciate this, the highlight that I remember, our very, very first live program was at 7:30 that night, and it was the Professional Slow Pitch Softball World Series from Louisville, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that exciting or what?
I can remember 1979 watching in the Fidel Bum Room, your
Yeah.
early days, badminton and table tennis, and a lot of stuff.
But this one, the guy that spent $1,380,000 to be exclusively on ESPN, the beer on ESPN, Budweiser, standing right here, right next to my elbow, and the announcer says, "And now we're going to go to Louisville, Kentucky for our first live event on ESPN. It's the Slow Pitch Softball World Series featuring the Kentucky Bourbons and the Milwaukee Schlitz, brought to you by Budweiser." He's standing right next to me, and he said, "I thought we bought an exclusive." And I said, how do you answer that? I mean, this guy's spending all the money. That was a lot of money in those days for television. And if I had been really sharp and really smart, I would have said, "You could have had a better softball team. They'd be playing," but I didn't think of that. And he was kidding. He knew it was just the luck of the roll, that's roll of the dice that it worked that way. There was tension. We didn't know how long we could go. Nobody had ever gone past 1 o'clock in the morning. Even when I was in television, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated in the late 1960s, when Richard Nixon resigned in the 1970s, didn't hear, none of the networks went past midnight. They just stopped, that's it, because television then was New York-centric. If it didn't fly in New York, they didn't really care about the rest of us. And they figured everybody in New York, in the Eastern time zones, asleep by 1 o'clock, so that was it, it ended. And we kept going. So we started at 7 o'clock, we went through till 5 o'clock Monday morning, so we went around the clock nearly 60 hours. And nobody had ever done that, and the intriguing thing is they told us it couldn't be done, and our president at that time that we had hired in July was Chet Simmons, the former president of NBC Sports, who was the single most vocal opponent of ESPN right up until we hired him. When he found out his contract wasn't going to be renewed, he thought cable TV sports was a great idea. And that night, we got some interesting reaction from around the country, and as the years have gone by, I have found out that some kids who were 5 or 6 said, "I remember my dad telling me, you have to watch this because someday this is going to be a great thing." And I have had athletes who've played at Alabama and played professional sports come up to me and say, I was a kid and my dad told me this, or I watched you when I was 5 years old or something. It's a pretty amazing story, and
We're going to talk about the state of the industry now because it's grown and now it's facing some challenges. But first, I want to ask you, and you're probably going to have to shoot through slides because we're zipping around here. The power of ideas, Bill. And I want our young audience to understand that I think sometimes when you're 18, 20, you think that the Wild West has been settled. That there are a lot of things have been kind of claimed, and I'm sure even in 1978, 79. There were people that said, this is what broadcasting is. And
absolutely.
Bill, I really want you to impress upon folks that ideas are still as valuable as ever, and there's still as much ground to be plowed as there ever was.
Indeed, especially with the new technology with live streaming for any event. All of us in here, we could produce, in this room, just the number of people here, we could produce thousands of years of video just streaming, just by doing something every day. It's just fascinating. We had 8,760 hours of time to fill. Nobody's going to do that. It can't be done. How are we going to get it done? We ask questions. Anybody who thinks everything that can be invented has been invented is wrong. It's not the way it works. ESPN acquired ABC Radio many years ago. And I was talking to a fellow in Dallas, Texas, who had been with ABC before they were acquired. I said to him, what's the difference between ABC when they owned it and ESPN? And his answer was interesting, I thought. ABC sent messages saying, don't rock the boat. We don't want your new ideas. Just do your job and mind your own business. When ESPN came in, they said, what kind of ideas have you got? Any idea you have, try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, drop it and move on. The ESPN especially, and really this is the way I have always approached it, if you don't try something, how do you know it's not going to work? You're talking yourself out of it. There is never, never, never a shortage of new ideas, and over the years, I can remember a lot of new things coming in. And FedEx wasn't here forever. Jet engines, airplanes weren't. When we started ESPN, we were flying cross country many times in a DC-4 or DC-6 with propellers on the front. Have you seen those old planes? That was pretty classy for us. Took a week and a half to get there. It seemed to go chug along at 250 miles an hour or something. But I think in this room tonight, there are probably dozens of ideas that are perking in someone's mind. The neat thing about it today is right now, if somebody put their hand in the air and said, I've got this idea, between the three of us, we could have a website, a web address in 10 minutes, and by tomorrow morning we could have a coming soon page or under construction page, and our business is launched. Couldn't do that before. You can even get incorporated online with LegalZoom.com in 10 minutes. Back in the 1900s, way back in the ESPN. Yep. That sounds really old. You had to go and have a lawyer do all of the incorporation papers and so on. Mm-hmm. Never think that all of the ideas have been taken. It just isn't so.
Well, let's move on to the state of the industry. And
sure.
I know you've got thoughts on this, but in September, sports cable channels, because of football starting, usually have big months.
Yep.
They lost 7,000 subscribers a day at ESPN in September. They shed 203,000 total households to fall to 87.5 million subscribers.
I would say just 87.5. Okay. Yeah. That's a lot. That's just around 87 point. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. It's the lowest number of ESPN subscribers in a decade. It's a decline from over 100 million subscribers just over 5 years ago. Now, there are people now, and you're not a gloom and doom guy. You're an optimist.
I'm a real optimist, yeah.
And but there are struggles. How many students out here? How many of you folks are students at DePauw or students anywhere? Okay, great. How many of you brought a TV to campus at the start of the semester? More than I would think. But used to be you'd ask that question, and everybody had a TV. Now you stream. You watch it on YouTube. You watch it on your phone. It's not broadcasting anymore, it's narrowcasting. It's finding an audience that's going to latch on to the thing that they want, whether it's sports or
It's hyper-specific. It really is. One-on-one is what it amounts to.
But are you bullish about the future of cable?
About the cable or communications?
Well, getting a company charging for people to watch.
I think it'll always be there. I don't know that it'll be as robust as it is today. They're finding new ways with streaming and so on. One of the fun numbers that you and I talked about, year before last, ESPN streamed 82 billion minutes. And that's a lot of, between us here, we could probably do that if we really had to. But that's a lot of minutes.
That's a lot of minutes.
And if you're interested in the numbers, that equals 156,000 plus years when compared to our original 8,760 hours. I don't think the business is going to go away. I think the pricing will change. I think with over the top and with all the streaming and so on. But I don't think it's ever going to go away as such. Certainly not in my lifetime. Now, no comments about that.
We're 2 years apart, right?
Yeah, something like that. But it really. I talked to ESPN the other day during all of the NFL stuff to which you just referred. Some are down 6%. Different. Each entity is down different one, and ESPN is up a few percent on Monday Night Football. Just Monday Night Football. That's all. The other thing, the doom and gloom about Disney and about ESPN being cash drained and firing people, et cetera, et cetera. The recent Disney numbers came out, and the ESPN contribution percentage-wise is less than 1% difference to Disney. When they're dealing in such huge numbers and they lose, I mean, 5 million homes or 15 million homes, that sounds like disaster, but we'll show you in a second here the kinds of numbers that we were talking about. But it is shrinking, there's no question.
And with Amazon out there and Google being a player, the media landscape has changed. It's not just ABC, CBS, NBC, and now we had ESPN, CNN, Fox, all the others.
And we have all of these people, right? Everybody here can stream anything they want.
That's right.
So you're all competition to ESPN as well, or competition or a contributor too. Take your pick.
Well, here's another way to look at it. So I did some number crunching today, which is dangerous. But
and he's cheating because you didn't tell me he was doing this part.
I'll let you know this. ESPN pays $700 million a year ballpark for baseball. And they, according to what I was able to pull up, they get about 90 games a year out of the deal. So if you divide 700 by 90, that works out to be $7.7 million a game to broadcast, just the rights to broadcast a game. Now, to put that in perspective, in 1981, when Jerry Reinsdorf bought the Chicago White Sox, and he got the stadium too, he paid $20 million. Yeah. So the rights to broadcast 9 hours of baseball equates owning a major league franchise and a stadium.
Yep.
36 years later. Is that sustainable? Can the rights for these broadcasts continue to climb if ESPN and the others are all fighting for audience share?
Let me get past this one. We talked about that already. Just a quick look. We didn't have big fancy business plans. I'll talk to some individuals afterwards if we want to talk about that. Every business needs financing and advertising and content or product and so on, technology today, and then you have to have subscribers, which we did. Those are my 6 words that I live by.
ABC, NBC.
ABC, NBC. And every now and then somebody will say, wait, what do you mean ABC, NBC? We're talking about ABC network. No. Always be curious, never be complacent. And if you just stick that in your head and whatever problem comes up, it seems to work pretty well. It certainly has for me. We're talking about the numbers, and there's the annual forecast revenue fees by Kagan. And if you see, we started asking for 1 penny a day per subscriber from the cable industry.
30 cents a month.
30 cents a month. ESPN, as you see now, takes in $842 million monthly on fees alone. So it's declining. It used to be higher than that when there were not much higher, because as you'll see on the next one, they charge, this is the ESPN family of networks, ESPN, ESPN News, ESPN2, and so on, charge nearly $10 a month from the cable operators. And the competition has got a tough time catching up to them. Those same rights fees to which you were just referring, those other companies are bidding on them. And if it's impactful on ESPN, as you say, if it's as impactful on them, think what it's going to do to Fox and some of those. They don't have that same pot to pull dollars from.
But if you were going to put your futuristic cap on, where would you see NFL, Major League Baseball, college football contracts in 10 years? Are they going to be stable, down, up? Will the trend continue to?
I think the numbers, these $20 billion contracts for a conference for 10 years and so on, I think they will probably come down on a per game basis. I think that you put them all together, though, they're still going to be very, very healthy. Back when ESPN started, there were only 25 games a year on TV because of all of the restrictions and the antitrust and so on. Now ESPN does over 4,000 live basketball games. They do 435 football games. Maybe they'll only do 335. Are we all, as a country, as a fandom, are we going to miss the ones that they don't do? Probably not. And they'll still make money.
That dovetails nicely into your new venture. If you could just give the folks out here an idea. Bill's always got something cooking. And as it turns out, I learned this yesterday through a news release from your agent, but this is the start of a world tour. This guy's like Bono. So, he's got handlers backstage, and, you didn't want any blue M&Ms? I don't know, there's something going on back there. Tell us what you're up to.
But really, it's just a continuation of what I said earlier about the Y2K. Every student, every athlete will have an opportunity to do some things. When you look across the broad landscape of sports, the one place that is never really covered, other than we all are excited in our own hometown, is our own hometown. It's every town, everywhere in America is a sports town of some degree. They may have the crack softball team, or they may have a pee-wee hockey team, or whatever. And with the ability to stream and the ability technologically to come up with a very inexpensive, high-definition television camera, we're able to live stream, and I'll use right here, use Greencastle, Indiana. We could have the Greencastle, Indiana sports
I think we do tonight.
entities.
We're actually using the cameras here tonight.
That's right. But we're going to take them back, though. They're not theirs yet.
Okay.
We'll send you some others. But anyway, we think that every hometown should have its own network. Now we're looking, and what we're launching tonight and what the press release was about is all young people or retired people or an athlete who played for 10 years, now he's 35 years old and he's looking back at his history. Oh, he wants to tell his son, you should have seen me in my prime. I was doing this. Well, now we'll be able to show them in their prime. Because what it amounts to, it's as simple as an iPad with the technology that we have and the app that we have. And we can create as big a network in a town or a small network. Not us creating, it's the town itself. It's really, in the financial business, you hear, especially on various and sundry internet sites, they talk about crowdfunding. They're trying to raise money to do something. We're not talking about that. We're talking about crowdsourcing sports information. We can't go into every town in America and find that each of you has this amazing basketball program. We have this amazing women's softball team, or we have this amazing pee-wee hockey league. There's no way anybody's going to do it. However, if we make our technology and the idea available, and it's so easy to stream, and we're talking, you know what production costs are for football games and basketball games. Now we're down talking $25 to $50 or $75 to do the same thing. Amazing. Now, is it going to be the same quality as two 18-wheelers coming in and doing a massive TV? Of course not. But that's not what it's about. We're talking about memories for families. We're talking about opportunities for students to learn things about production and editing and advertising and sales and whatever they want to learn. And we've set up, in effect, a course curriculum in Arizona that, and you can go to htnsports.com tonight and click on the right box, and you can give us your information, find out all the information you want to know, tell us what you're interested in. You might be interested in being a producer, a cameraman, a writer, whatever it is.
So we started in 1950 with mass communication, broadcasting, and now we're getting to extreme levels.
We're back to that Y2K story where they said every single person will be able to do something. And the phones in everyone's pocket in this room tonight are so much more powerful than all of the networks put together in 1979. It's fascinating.
It's an amazing time. This is my final question, so when I finish up, we're going to have you walk to mics in the aisles. We've got them set up, and I want the audience to join in. I'd be remiss, Bill, if I didn't ask you to just offer some advice, especially to young people who are looking at their lives. And I want to ask you, as part of that question, how DePauw has impacted your life.
Well, I think, first of all, you already know what the advice would be to you. You can't be discouraged by the first no. You have to always be curious. When you have the passion, let me put it a different way. If you don't have the passion about an idea you're trying to sell somebody, why would you want to buy that particular product? So I think one thing you have to do is be passionate. You don't have to know everything to start with. Ask as many questions as you can. Luck doesn't hurt, but don't rely on luck. Rely on yourself. I don't know why the thought just popped in my head. All of us know about Dr. Seuss, and he wrote a book about, the places you'll go, brains in your head and shoes in your feet, the places you'll go. And that's really, it's not very scientific or economic, whatever, but it works. And at DePauw, you get the kind of education, you wouldn't have come here in the first place. First of all, you're bright because you're here. Second of all, now that you're here, take advantage of it with all of the professors, with your classmates, with teammates, whatever it might be. And as you know, I'm big in the sports business. I think teams can motivate each other, not only for the game that they're playing, but in life. And when I was at DePauw, the Greek system was pretty prevalent at the time.
Still is.
And we had, I don't know what the numbers are now, but in our house, everybody supported everybody, because that's what it was. And we would have, I had a French teacher from Baxter, Tennessee, and I had trouble understanding the Southern French with a Southern accent. I'm not being derogatory, I just had trouble understanding. So we were talking about it because the seniors and juniors would say, what can we do to help? So I went to the one guy and he said, let me go talk to her. So students helping students solve problems, students going to professors solving problems, and I always got an answer. I don't think there was ever a door closed in a professor's office while I was here if there was a question to be asked. And I think that, I don't know, maybe that's true everywhere, but I haven't gone everywhere. I've gone here, and the camaraderie and the loyalty of alumni over the years is amazing. I mentioned earlier I was fortunate enough to be a Rector Scholar, and the investment that Edwin Rector made back in 1920? 17, I rounded off.
Too close.
Still bearing fruit. Mm-hmm. And that is an amazing thing, and they're not the only, he's not the only one who has done those kinds of things. So it's an amazing place. I've had lifelong friends from here. Played golf with them, travel, visit with them, families travel with them, and so on. And it's just something, you will remember this experience, no matter how successful you are or how much of the experience you take with you or how little the experience you take with you, you will remember your days at DePauw. And if you apply and put them into your brain, so to speak, and mix them in there, as I said, oh, the places you'll go. It's really positive.
Bill Rasmussen, folks.
Have to put that one up there.
Looks like let's make a deal up there.
Monty Hall will be here to ask, behind which door, the E, the S, the P, or the N? We're going to take some questions.
Yeah, we're going to take some questions. I think you were going to jump in with a question that everybody wants to ask.
I was.
So let's jump in.
Before we start, here's the, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, well, I'm just, we've been straying around here.
Here it is, the most frequently asked question everywhere I've been for the last 40 years.
And it'll appear on your screen with any luck.
See, this is what we did sometimes. It didn't happen right away, but it will be here eventually.
Since the dawn of time, the great sages of the world have pondered the mysteries of life. Why are we here? How did the universe start? How many licks does it take? But nothing has confounded the great thinkers of the day more than one seemingly unanswerable question. Why Bristol? A dubious question indeed. However, for this elusive quandary, there is an answer. As with most stories of fate, this one started in a village with relaxed zoning laws. While home to the American Clock and Watch Museum, Bristol, Connecticut also welcomed satellite dishes. Lots of them. Local sportscaster and amateur satellite programming junkie Bill Rasmussen saw gold in those dishes and decided to purchase one to transmit local sports to Connecticut, the nation's epicenter of sports mania and fanaticism. That's when RCA offered him an opportunity he couldn't refuse. 24 hours of satellite time transmitted nationally for the same price. He accepted, of course, but it wasn't until an agonizing drive to Jersey that the gravity of that opportunity hit him. What in the world am I going to broadcast for 24 hours? Bill's son, startled from his nap, blurted, "Show football all day for all I care." Bill thought to himself, more sports? Sports all day, every day? Who would want to watch that? Well, wouldn't you know it? Somebody did. Tonight we celebrate the founders, the risks they took, and the many milestones that have followed that infamous drive to Jersey over 35 years ago.
line up if you would. If you have things you want to ask Bill, ask anything in the world. And while we're getting set to do that, I'm going to ask you for a Monon Bell prediction.
Now, is that like asking is the kettle black? Of course
Well,
it's
of
a
course.
DePauw win. I mean,
course.
what?
We want to spread that.
We want to. I would not be a good one to ask to predict a score. If Berman was here, he would put on his Swami hat and he would do his thing. But even when he was doing that, he was only hitting about 60%. And I don't want to jinx anything. I just want to win. That's it. And that's in life, by the way, not just the Monon Bell, but we always want to win.
Please don't be bashful. Step up. And I want to thank you, Bill, Bill was integral in DePauw actually and Wabash getting the Monon Bell on television for the first time nationally in 1984.
Yeah, that was.
So.
And the Wabash guys didn't much care for it. They didn't help us very much. But our alumni supported it. They're bad
It's a good
guys.
thing. Please.
Hi.
I just wanted to thank you for creating ESPN because it gave me a great childhood. My dad was the 40th employee at ESPN, and so my childhood was filled with going cross country with him and going to all kinds of sporting events and everything like that. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
What's your dad's name?
Neil Patterson.
Oh, here, I'll get that.
This is his
Oh, I wish we had a camera that could zoom in on his ID. This is, Bill, take a look at this. It's even
Oh,
got the
I
original logo on it.
Yeah, well, that's why. He was there in the early days,
Yeah.
I can tell you that. I had the same card. You know what my number was? Guess.
1.
What a wonderful guesser. Is he sharp or what?
Thank you for being here tonight. Please, go ahead.
Yes, I'm her mother, and
Aha!
Family night at the Ubben Lectures.
and I handed her the card. I don't have a question. In fact, I was just up in Bristol for the last month, and from the time I first saw ESPN until today, I mean, it takes up the whole back hill and everything. I mean,
Isn't it amazing?
it's amazing. When my husband was called to come and join ESPN, it hadn't been on the air very long. There was somebody that knew my husband and knew that his background was in engineering, aerospace engineering, as a matter of fact. And he goes, not sure if I want to do this. So he came up to Bristol, talked to people, and they said, well, if you take the job, we would love to have you. Your family will have to move up here. His comment was, I'm not sure if a 24-hour sports network is going to fly. So I think I'm going to leave my family in Indiana, and I'll come up here and see how we do it. Eventually we do, and I still have the home. It's up in Wookett.
Oh, wow.
Yes, on the lake, across from where Scotty Connell used to live.
So we convinced your husband it was going to work, obviously.
Yes, that it was going to work out. So he was in remote engineering. And so when he had to do his Bristol time, as he called it, he had our home up there to stay. But he worked there for 20 years. He retired in 2000, and he won 2 sports Emmys for covering NASCAR racing.
Isn't that great?
So, and I just appreciate you giving, like my daughter said, giving us the opportunity to travel all over the country. After my husband retired, though, he said, you know, Pam, the one place that I never really covered sports was South Dakota. I'm not sure if they have sports in South Dakota.
Oh.
And he goes, so I never had the opportunity to see Mount Rushmore. So 3 years ago, we went to Mount Rushmore. So he didn't miss out on anything. But,
That's great.
But the kids and I, we had wonderful experiences. My children were young at the time, had wonderful experiences, Mr. Rasmussen. So thank you very much for starting a 24-hour network.
Thank you.
For being here tonight. Thank you very much. Please.
Nobody wants that.
What do you think of ESPN now? Did you ever have it growing?
Oh, I hardly ever watch it. I don't even turn the TV on. Are you kidding me?
I don't believe that.
That's not true. That's why. I think they're getting, just to me, it's just getting confusing because they have so much to offer. And that's the very positive side of it. If you're interested in soccer in Europe, you can find the answers. If you're interested in Major League Baseball, or if you're interested in lacrosse or hockey, the ability to do things now online has spread the ESPN ability to dispense sports to the public just, I don't know, tenfold, 100-fold. Some of the things that we thought SportsCenter was a great thing, just 1/2 hour a night around 6 or 6:30, and now I don't know, they do what, 10 sport? I think they might do 8 or 10 sports centers. I don't think it's a bad thing. For sports junkies, it's wonderful. They just can't get enough of the sports. However, there are some people who can't. We were named in a suit one time, divorce suit, because the wife claimed that ESPN was taking her husband's time from her and she wanted out. And that was the first one. It happened after that too. So I think they do a pretty good job.
Thanks for your question. And you know, for the young people in the audience, there was a time when if the California Angels were the Major League Baseball game of the week, that might be the only time you see them all year.
Absolutely.
30, 40 years ago. So you're in a world now, if you want to see anything at any time, it's out there for you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Boyd Ensley, and I'm a 7th grader here in Greencastle, and I wanted to know, what's your favorite sport?
My favorite sport? We want to guess, and I'll tell you the real answer. You want to guess?
Baseball?
Baseball. He's right.
Well done.
Very good.
Put a question over here.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Doing fine. How about you?
I'm good. I was curious. So, politics and social issues have kind of found their way into the sports industry, particularly on ESPN with Jamel Hill and Colin Kaepernick, and Donald Trump has kind of been speaking on the stances that have been taken on these sports platforms. I was curious of your perspective or your stance on that. Do you think there's a place for that on ESPN? Or?
Well, first of all, I don't have a stance on that. I'm interested in sports. The way I look at sports, after 9 innings, 10 innings, 12 innings, extra overtime in football, somebody's got 4-3 in baseball, or 16-10. That's the only thing I'm interested in. The rest of it is, I just stay away from it. I don't get involved. When you get to my age, and I've been around a long time, sports to me are the entertainment side, and whatever people are doing, that's their business. I don't get involved in it. I don't really have an opinion on it. It's the way it is. I've just been so laser focused on the sport itself. I think sports are the only really true reality television that there is. When your team is down, as St. Louis was a couple of years ago to Texas, and down to the last strike, and David Freese hit a triple to tie the score and comes up and wins the game, St. Louis fans were about to fall out, and Texas fans were ready to celebrate, and in one pitch, it went this way. That's reality. If you're sitting there in the stands, that's reality TV, and that's all I'm interested in. I'm interested in the execution of the game and the sport.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's a good question. Let me
Very good
piggyback
question.
on that, because I know you don't want to inject yourself in, the politics or the social issues, but it does create a challenge for broadcasters, doesn't it? If you're
sure.
a sports channel?
Yeah. Well, we used to be a news channel too. We had an ill-fated experiment many years ago, where the morning hours from 7 to 9, one of the presidents said, "I think we have to get some news on the air. We'll do 22 hours of sports and 2 hours of news." It lasted about 3 months because people turned out they were watching for more sports at 7 in the morning, at 8 in the morning. But yes, it does go everywhere.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions? I'm going to ask one final question. And
Wait, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
What did I just say before? Always be curious, always ask your questions and get your answer, and 3 people came up. So if you don't have any questions now, what does that mean? I met a lot of you guys twice sometimes, right? Already just being here a few days, and you don't have any questions? You come up to me and ask me questions. Ask a question over there so everyone can, or over there.
Well, I appreciate all the time you spent with our students this week, and are going to continue to. It's amazing.
I'm having more fun. I learn more from them than they'll ever learn from me. No more questions? Oh, we got one.
We've satiated them.
We got somebody moving. Good.
Hey.
We'll just take a couple more.
I was wondering what the most memorable sportscast that you can recall is.
The most memorable, I'm sorry?
Sportscast, like, I mean, I always think about, like, the Stanford Cal call when they return the onside kick for a touchdown. I just want to know maybe your favorite.
Wow. I've seen a lot of them, and so it's kind of...
Yeah. That's what I'm really interested in.
Although I didn't like it, from a fan's point of view, it was one of the greatest comebacks and so on. When David Ortiz hit the Grand Slam home run when the Red Sox were down 3-0 and they came back to win their first World Series in 2 or 3 centuries, the Red Sox fans, they're really tough. That was a great moment. But that's the beauty of sports. There are so many great moments. I was talking to Yogi Berra many years ago. And Yogi, how are you and everything? And somebody came up and wanted to know the Jackie Robinson play in the World Series. And Yogi's answer, whenever anybody came up to him, if they said, I have a question about that, and they get that far about that call, is what they're going to say. And Yogi'd say, he was out. Jackie Robinson says he was safe. Talking to Yogi about those things and meeting other people who have participated in really significant moments in sport, and that's what they are. They're an individual moment or a play that becomes your favorite. And but looking at the overall, I think it's when your team wins, those are the great moments for you. And the heartbreak when they lose is really pretty amazing. The emotional downturn when your team loses, especially if they were favored, that's tough.
How about the end of last year's Monon Bell game?
Yeah, there's a perfect example. Yes, sir.
Actually, we've got a person over here, and
Oh,
let's get
okay.
through these, and we're going to wrap up. So please go ahead.
Hi, this question is actually from my dad, but he was wondering in your opinion, what is the most challenging sporting event to produce from a production standpoint?
The America's Cup race. When they held a race in Australia many years ago, it's a triple satellite loop. And all the engineers tell me that's really tough. I have no idea what it means, but they tell me. No, they had to. The theory of the satellites is every satellite that's up there has a cone, if you will, of coverage on the Earth, and but today it's commonplace. But the first time that we did it, it was just they were writing about it in the technical magazines and everything else. That was the toughest.
Thank you.
Please.
So obviously ESPN nowadays covers all different types of sports.
Mm-hmm.
My question was, what first major league sport really showed interest in ESPN? Saw promise in it.
Before we even went on the air, I met with Pete Rozelle, the NFL commissioner, talking about what we were going to do, and he said, you know, he knew what we were up to and what our track record was, and he listened, he asked questions, he was very specific about it, and he, by the way, was an outstanding commissioner. And I remember his words, and he said, I have to tell you, no, we can't do business with you at this point. He said, not today, Bill, but someday. And someday, they did a couple of games in the late 1990s, but someday for me was when they got Monday Night Football in 2005. And that was a really big moment.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, so I don't know if I missed it, but what year did you graduate again from DePauw?
I don't think they kept track of the years back then.
1996. 54.
54, 1954.
My grandmother graduated in 52. She was an AOPI here, so she'll be glad to know there's someone sort of.
Glad you found somebody back in her era.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Who was Chris Berman before ESPN? And what caused you to hire him?
Where was Chris Berman?
Who was he? I mean, where did he emerge from?
Oh, he's a student at Brown University. And in Connecticut, about, I don't know, 8 or 10 miles down, Interstate 84, was an NBC UHF station, and Chris would come home on the weekends from Providence, and he was doing weekend sports. And he heard of this new project coming along. He came out and said, I can do this. And he jumped right in and did it. We had a lot of people who thought they could do it, and it's amazing. And this is one thing, if you decide to pursue something, don't just put the letter in the mail and then forget it. We had 2,500 unsolicited tapes, audition tapes for ESPN announcers. you can't interview all those people. So we told everybody to come up. We said, sure, come on. We just sent everybody a letter and said, come on to Bristol. You know how many showed up? Less than 100. Because all of a sudden somebody said, wait a minute, they're really going to ask me? Now what am I going to do? One in particular was really tense about his audition tape, I guess, or whatever you would call it, because auditioning meant you wrote your own script, you went in on the air, and they put you on live right now. And this guy went in, and you could almost see the sweat dripping down his spine, and he was as stiff as a board, looking straight ahead. He'd read all the stories, turned the page, took his microphone off, put it down, walked out the studio door, turned left, and walked out the front door, and we never heard from him again. It's not easy to go into uncharted waters, but it's not impossible, and you just have to do it. And I don't know how all the streaming stuff works. It's uncharted waters for me, but I know we can make it work. We'll get it done.
If you guys are quick, we'll take both of these questions and call it a night. I want to remind people, Bill will be available in the lobby signing books, and the books are available as well. So we'll take these two questions and wrap up.
I think my question kind of relates with your last statement, but my question is, how do you deal with adversity when you were first trying to create your
I'm sorry, I'm not.
How do you deal with adversity?
So can you tell me the mental aspect? I'm reading that when you first tried to start the company, when you were trying to find investors, some people just didn't believe it was going to work.
Just when you went to investors, that some people laughed at you, probably.
Oh, they did laugh at us. Mm-hmm. We went to major venture firms, major companies. We visited the Campbell Soup Foundation, Mellon Bank Foundation, Pittsburgh Plate Glass, on and on. And the irony is, and Taft Broadcasting was another one, they all said no. And the irony is that our eighth trip to raise money was Getty Oil. And I'm not so sure that they really knew about the idea very much, but the vice president to whom we were directed fancied himself a television star. And he said, how does this work? And we got all involved in it. And because he thought he could swing the money from the Getty investment fund, which he did, and we're very grateful for it, but he was a royal pain. Well, never mind. He was a royal whatever to get rid of. He would show up on sets, and he would show up in the booth and so on. So you kind of had to do what we had to do to get him there. But people just didn't want to invest. They just didn't know about it.
But it just takes one yes.
That's right. 7 no's. One yes in that case was far more powerful than the 7 previous no's.
All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And the night's final question.
When did ESPN come the closest to failing, and how did you guys get over that?
Come the closest to failing?
Yeah, when did you guys come the closest to failing?
I think ESPN wasn't going to fail. It was the same Getty Oil money guy. We got $20 million in 1979, St. Valentine's Day. They agreed to finance the network with a $10 million direct investment and $10 million to buy all of our remote trucks, $20 million. And he said, and we will continue to support you until we want to make sure this is going to work. And after the first year, and they had gone past the $100 million mark because of certain spending habits, I suppose. That was probably the closest because they had to make a decision to pull the plug or not, as they said. And they went on and ended up investing $145 million. And I love to tell the story when somebody asks, quick question, how did you start ESPN? How do you start a network like that? And I say, it's easy. $9,000 credit card cash advance, $30,000 from friends and neighbors, and $145 million from Getty. Voila, there it is.
And what's it worth today, ballpark?
Well, it's gone down in value at some point. The highest it was estimated, I guess, by Wall Street, it's part of Disney today, of course, was $66 billion. And today it's probably in the 50s. Still not bad.
The $66 billion man, ladies and gentlemen. Bill Rasmussen, DePauw graduate, thanks for being here tonight. You got a little task here you want to take on.
Wait, I have one last question for you.
Encore.
Are you ready? Are you ready for some football?
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
That was fun.